Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Republic of Sarah. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I love the opening where it's like, all right, everyone's gathered, and we're gonna, show what true democracy is, and we're gonna work out this these laws and everything very civilly. Hard cut, you get the intro title card, hard cut to them arguing about the rules and everything they're setting up, which I think is so fascinating. But to be fair, that's kind of, the argument could be that that's government in a nutshell, so it's kind of but the point was we're going to be a little bit different, but it's yeah, but obviously they're very different people from different backgrounds with different viewpoints on certain things. Obviously, Danny wants to make there to be a fourth branch of the government that looks over economics, but then AJ's well, if that's the case, I want something for the police. But then Liz is well, if there's going to be one for the police need oversight. But then for her, it's not for people who are, that there's a yes and no to that. That's a whole thing. And in Maya, there's a whole because later on comes up the conversation of immigration, which is she's oh, you're anti-immigration. Liz is no, I'm not. My parents are immigrants, Maya. The fact of the matter is, it comes into the conversation of we can't just let people come in and out of Greylock like that. We've got to kind of set up some borders, and once again, immigration just in general is a big conversation across every country. Obviously, it's a big topic, specifically here in the U.S. Obviously, I know that just because, I live in the U.S., so I know it's a conversation in other countries, but I'm not as well versed on their laws and their situations when it comes to immigration. You hear it pop up every once in a while, but that's also the thing, you kind of get allocated mainly to the country you live in. You'll know their laws a little bit better than you would, and just how things work on a governmental level than you would other. It's a whole thing, but I thought that was interesting because you had this woman, Kayla, who shows up, not only her, but an entire caravan of people coming here because there's a town she's from that literally went through the same thing Greylock did, except they let their lighten do what they were doing, and that was fracking, and it flattened their town. But hearing about what Sarah was up to made them decide, no, we need to move to a town like Greylock. Greylock decided to fight back. Granted, they had to do a little compromising, but they didn't have to fully compromise like that other town did. So because of that perspective, though, it's a conversation about, well, what do we do about immigration? Sarah's okay, so what we do is, Maya's kind of for, Danny and Liz are kind of against, but then AJ's kind of suggesting the conversation comes up about doing a background check. I think it was Danny that suggested, so AJ's going to be doing that. Sarah's going to show Liz there's enough room for new families that want to come in, because we need to show that Greylock is welcoming new people, new ideas, and what people can bring to the town and stuff like that. We kind of have to show that we have open arms, whereas a lot of places, for different situations, for different reasons, have to be very no, we have to kind of pick and choose, which is again, I don't think it's a black and white conversation. I lean more towards my thoughts on immigration in certain regards. I'm kind of it's a second chance for a lot of people, and that should be allowed that second chance. But I also recognize, for some people saying, on a, economic level, it's a whole, I said, it's a whole thing. So, I said, I have my perspective on it, but I'm also, not well versed in all the ins and outs of what that means. But, it's just, because a lot of times I think more with my heart than I do my head in that regard. I'm stupid like that. So I just, that's just my perspective on things. So that conversation comes at an interesting time, considering Sarah's dad just pops up. It's nothing. She's I haven't seen you in 18 years, and you just pop up yeah. He's yeah, I saw you on TV. You're full of oh, my little girl's over. It's no, I'm not your little girl. Then you have Danny being a lot more open to the conversation, because the moment AJ finds out, wait, your dad's back in town? She's okay, you need me to? I'll do the thorough background check and everything. So, but Danny's a lot more open and receptive to it. Understandably so. I think it makes a lot of sense, because for Sarah, and she talked about this a couple episodes ago, the reason why she's so in defense, yes, I hate her mom for what she did, but I also can't hate her because she's all I had. You left, dad left years before that, so it's I had no one. So mom was the only family that was kind of there. So issues and all that aside, she was still my mom. She was still the mom I had all these good memories of. Yes, I had the bad, but the good kind of outweighs the bad to a certain extent. So, but for Danny, it's easier to latch onto his dad because, for one, it's like, I'm older, I remember Dad. He's a little bit more understanding because I think from his own circumstances of not wanting to stick around in Greylock, he's like, Dad and Mom got together because Mom got pregnant, and Dad was never really like the father figure, so like he never really wanted to be a dad. You know, he was a parent, but that didn't mean he was ready to be one. So Danny's a little more understanding, like, right, Dad just kind of had to leave. I'm not saying like I'm not upset with the fact that he left, but I'm at least a little more understanding and willing to like ask questions, whereas Sarah's just kind of, nope, bounce. I want nothing to do with you. I don't want to talk to you. But like I said, it's interesting because Danny would also have that perspective, considering like he has a lot more positive memories of his dad than his mom. Like his mom being around like led to a lot of issues and stuff like that. But for Sarah, it's like, well, at least Mom was there, like, you know, issues and all, but she was there. She was the only family I could count on. But also, she also blames her dad for like her mom, like the way their dad talks about it, like their mom already had like drinking issues, but it got worse after he left. And even Sarah throws that at him, like, you know, ask Danny, and he's like, what's that mean? So it's like, oh, you have no idea what Danny went through because you left. To be fair, it wasn't just you left, like you've been going, like you haven't contacted your kids in 18 years. You haven't been into like, because he saw their mom's like thing, like when she opened up about her DUIs and stuff like that, because obviously Lighton was going to use that against Sarah and them and everything. So there's that element to it. But it's like, he was like, yeah, three DUIs. I had no idea that things had gotten that bad. Easy to not know things had gotten that bad when you just kind of abandon your kid. Once again, is it saying that, because the way the conversation sounds, it makes it seem like she wasn't that bad until after he left. Like, it's just like she had her issues, and she still does. But I think a combination of all of that, like, because it's easier, because, like, she can't, like, send all of her frustration towards her mom, which she definitely has, and I think, like, he gets double, because it's like, you abandoned us, but also you leaving led Mom to be the abusive person she was to my brother. Like, he's still got the scars because of it. So it's like, she, like, a lot of that blame falls on him, because she can't hate her mom as much as she wants to, because it's like, Mom was the only mom and only family I had at the time. So once again, I think that's the interesting and very complex thing about that relationship. And especially when we dive into, like, why, well, the moment he started talking about, like, he wanted to make amends, I was thinking, like, oh, you're dying. Like, you wanted, before you died, like, because I think, like, he's, like, sick or something. I was thinking, like, oh, he's dying and he's trying to make amends. But it turns out, in actuality, he's wanted by the U.S. government because he actually leaked some government documents. And for him, it's like, there's a lot of stuff that he saw, like, from a federal level of, like, kind of like some unsavory behavior, but he just kind of went so long not saying anything. And then there was, like, a building in a different country that collapsed because some officials were being paid off to allow some people to do some, like, shoddy, like, construction work. And this particular building collapsed, killing, like, 16 people, injuring dozens. Because I'm not trying to, like, but wasn't there, like, because I think an episode of Leverage kind of covered a similar thing, of Leverage Redemption. I think there, you know, I don't watch the news much, but I think that was in response also to, like, well, that was probably done, like, before it happened, but I think there was something real world-wise that kind of reflected that a little bit. Like, I mean, like, in the real world, like, I think something like that happened. I mean, it is, you know, it's not, like, out of the realm of possibility. But I think it had something like that, of that nature, happen more recently, maybe. Once again, I am ignorant. I don't watch the news as much as I should about a lot of, like, stuff that's going on. Once again, even in my own country, but also, like, even, you know, on a worldwide scale, like international news, you know, so I will admit that's ignorance on my part, but, he had leaked some files about it, which Sarah's kind of like, why would I believe that was actually you? Because for her, it's like, right, I was actually warming up to you. I was actually like, I want to hate you, but I started seeing you as a human, kind of like her mom. But now it's like, nah, like, you know what? You were just using me, like that sob story, like just so, because we are our own country, there are no extradition rules set up so you can be like hide away here. But telling her that, it's like, what inspired him to leak those files is when he saw her on TV a few months ago standing up. It's like, if my daughter's able to do something like that, why can't I? So he leaked and the files and he ran, and he's like, at the end of the day, my future is your decision. Like, it's up to you to decide. And for Sarah, it's a complicated thing because, well, when it comes down to it, Danny and Maya are like on a yay for immigration because it changed. I think Danny's mind was changed about it. Even Maya being like, oh, I knew you'd come around, because it basically is like, we need like a background check and then like a week waiting period, because Danny is all about, we need to kind of get some of this Constitution out. Granted, it took like 116 days for like the Constitution and all that stuff to kind of be written, but it's like, yeah, but that was back when it took 2 weeks to make bread, and now it's like we live in a faster time, so we should go. But that's also the problem. Like, if you move through things too quickly, that's when things kind of fall apart. You do need to kind of take your time. But Liz is kind of on the no side of things when it comes to this whole immigration things, and AJ kind of backs her as well, because it's like, we kind of need a more thorough vetting process, because I think she was specifically coming at it from like, yeah, we know what someone did, but we don't know the intricacies of it, like, so we do need more time to have a deeper dive. And so now it's a 2 for 2, and Sarah's going to be the deciding vote, and she knows, like, no, I need to say yes on immigration, because that's the obvious choice, like the good that can come about because of it. But her dad is what's it's like, if I say yes, that allows my dad to stay here, and it's just like, I want him away. Like, for so long, I didn't need him to do the typical dad things, but just, I needed him around. Now, I just want him to go, because being around causes so much pain, so. But ultimately, Sarah does decide on the, yes, we're going to, on the immigration law. What I thought was interesting too is, like, Sarah set it up so that now, like, they've written it in so that their laws and constitutions have to be rewritten from scratch every 5 years, because it's like, it's about adapting. Because once again, I think I was talking about specifically in this show that there are like still laws that exist on a state by state basis that are like super like based on like old times. Like, for example, like, I think I'd given a random example, like, because I remember like watching something where someone like talked about some of like the old laws that different states have, like, oh, you can't eat ice cream in the back seat while your dog is in the back seat with you. Like, I'm being super vague, but like something like that. Like, it's weird laws that technically don't apply anymore. So I think that's such an interesting thing of like, right, like, we need to revamp our laws like every once in a while in that regard of like, because the world is constantly changing, and Greylock should be able to change with it on a regular enough basis, because we need to adapt to what's happening in the world in the most, because it's like, right, we're trying to write laws to be perfect, but we are imperfect, and things are going to develop. The world is constantly changing, we see that every day, like, something that might have been okay before is super not okay now. And so, like, you have to adjust to the world, like, the world not being the same place. So I think that's such an interesting element too, like the whole like rewriting the laws like every 5 years, the kind of, because like there is no like perfect like encompassing of everything, like, oh, we wrote this like in 2020 and it's going to stand up so strong in 2100. It's like, no, it's not, like, because things are going to be different then, because that was also the thing of like, we need to write, because initially they're coming at it from like, we need to write these laws that are going to be, set precedents for the next 500 years. And it's like, but no, we do need to kind of break this down piece by piece and make it every 5 years. So we're going to be doing this one thing at a time, but also, making it so that these can be like completely built from the ground up, every 5 years, just so we can make sure, like, okay, if it probably feels like, okay, this is where the world still is, so this can still apply, cool, but this doesn't apply anymore, so we can scrap that and kind of work completely from the ground up. And that, so it's just an interesting, once again, as someone who's just ignorant to like a lot of how government works, I know the bare minimum, just stuff you learn in school and stuff like that, but it's just like getting like to see that inside view like that, it's just really interesting to see that. So circling back to some things, Danny and his dad now is more aware of what happened, And obviously for Danny, it's like, yeah, there were bad times, but for him, there was also some good. There was some light, and he's looking at the cookies that Corinne bought him, which that's a whole thing of like, oh, he's offering to help Corinne. It's just ironic because it's like, right, it's at the time your husband and your son is away. But even Grover being like, whoa, like, I'm not trying to be a dick or anything. It's just, as your friend, you need to like nip this in the bud. Like, I get it. Like, he's your first love and everything. And I'm not telling you not to feel that. You can't help who you love. It's like, that's fine. But like, it's nothing but trouble for both of you. You're married. He's engaged. And that could be a slippery slope. And it ends up being the slippery slope at the end. Like, the moment they're alone, I was like, oh boy, this is going to turn bad. But Danny opens up to her and finally admits, like, why he left in the first place. Is that because him and her were having a whole conversation of why he was a little bit more okay with, like, their dad than Sarah was because he's like, right, like, if my dad had like, if you don't just leave your family without or the people you love without having a good reason. And then there's a moment of silence between him, and I even said it audibly. I was like, you literally walked into that one, Danny. But he finally opens up to her. He's like, the night I left, me and my mom, like, got into it the worst we've ever gotten before. She was slapping me, calling me names, and in that moment, like, I did something I've never done before. I raised my fist. I was going to hit her back, but looking in his reflection, he saw, like, no, I don't want to become like my mom. Like, that violence that's in her, it's in me too. And because it's not just like a hereditary thing. It's a cycle of abuse. Like, when someone is abused, they're more likely to abuse someone else because that becomes like their default. Like, because I think for Danny, he's probably done everything he can to be nothing like his mom. You know, and for him, he was worried. Like, he's like, that's why I left. Like, you've done so much for me. You were there for me. You were kind to me. You were there picking glass out of my arm. You were always there for me, Corinne, and I wanted to do the same for you. Like, you were there for me, protecting me for so long that, like, obviously I needed to leave because I didn't want to tell you, because if I did, you want to come with me, and I wanted to protect you from me, you know? Because that's probably also a fear maybe Danny will have on some level, like, right, do I ever want to have kids? Because if I do, like, am I worried that I might turn into my mom? Or worse, like, on some level, will I do like my dad and leave? Would me leaving be better than me sticking around? Because if I stick around, I might become my dad. So that's a whole thing. So in that moment, him and Corinne kiss, and you're like, oh, that sucked. Like, it's all about the healing process, but it's messed up because, like, once again, she's married, he's engaged. And also, you can't forget the irony of it, because she was the one telling AJ not to be in a relationship where you're basically having an affair with a married woman. Granted, to be fair, we also saw how that, like, situation, there's a lot of contributing factors, but how that blew up into what it blew up into. So, you know that this, like Grover said, this is going to be trouble. I was hoping that Corinne would be able to kind of shut that down, but it's like, when you're caught up in the thralls of him being open and you finally understanding why he did what he did, especially for her, that him leaving left, like, it tore a hole in her heart. Like, she was, you know, Grover said it a couple episodes ago to Danny of, like, right, like, you messed her up bad, like, the way you left. Like, she didn't eat, she wasn't sleeping, like, she had fallen apart because of you. You just up and abandoned her. I mean, to be fair, they were engaged and everything too, so it's just, but, like, it's just, like I said, it's just the irony behind it. But at least in that regard, AJ was single, so it's like, right, like, it still wasn't changing the fact that you were potentially going to blow up a family situation. Same thing in that regard. Like, you're blowing up your engagement, but you're also blowing up, you made the whole, like, point to Adam, like, right, I'm not here. He became your bud and everything. Granted, we haven't seen any interactions between them. Granted, he hasn't been in any episodes, but we don't know, like, where Danny and Adam stand. It's going to be awkward the next time they're around each other, because it's like, yeah, he is a buddy, and there's also, like, the Grover thing, which Grover's going to kind of be probably torn, because it's like, yeah, I'm going to probably stick with Adam because, like, Adam's my buddy, but also, like, you know, I care for Corinne, like, she's a longtime friend, so there's a lot in that regard. It's just like, things are about to get super, super complicated, I'm sure. That's just going to end badly. I just get that feeling, you know? So, we'll see. Other elements of this episode involve Grover himself. Him not really being open about the fact is that he's going to therapy. I mean, that's also the conversation too, like mental health not being being stigma, like getting rid of the stigma of mental health. Like obviously there have been leaps and bounds of that, like nowadays, that the stigma isn't as bad as it is. Like you going to therapy isn't looked down upon. It's like, nah, a lot of people need therapy. A lot of people need help. You know, there's only so much you can do on your own before you need professional help in a lot of regards, especially in the Grover circumstances of like, you know, it's not easy. Like, you know, I can't even begin to imagine what it's like losing the person you love like that, you know, under those circumstances. And AJ was able to kind of convince him by taking him to see her dad, which Grover's like, why didn't you tell any of us? So that means, like, I guess, like, Sarah nor Corinne know about her dad's circumstances. And for her, it's like, right, I want him to kind of be able to keep his dignity without, like, you know, turning it into a little bit of a circus of, like, oh, like, here I am, like, you know. It's also because, like, right, because of the way you look when you first saw him. Because her dad has, like, was it a nervous system situation where basically it's like he's having multiple strokes at like once, and it's like his he's lost a lot of his cognitive functions and speech. And but for her, she's like, I know my dad's somewhere on the inside. Like he, you know, it just things ended up this way, and all she can think about is the life that he could be living if it wasn't for the circumstances. So it's like, Grover, you have a life in front of you. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but the thing is, you've got to keep in mind the life that you still have left to live. And so he's talking to Edna, and I thought it was powerful where Edna opens up about her circumstances. She knows what Grover's going through because she's been there twice. She's a widower twice, and I think that's an important thing for Grover too, to have someone who can understand, like who knows how to, like, right, I found my way forward and I can help you find your way forward. I'm not trying to rush you, but it's like not rushing you or anything. I know this is a process I know firsthand. Like her first husband died like from a heart attack in his sleep. The other was pancreatic cancer. Here one moment, gone the next. Obviously, there's a lot of parallels with Grover, and obviously for her, it's like how do you, and it was like, how do you? And she's like, you know, get up in the morning. He was like, yeah. And she's like, remind yourself that you're still breathing and find a way to just keep breathing. And it's like that second part's always the hardest. And you know, Grover, she's like, because of, and then Grover's like, the guilt of moving on, like even thinking of moving on, you know, it's like even when she was sick, I was thinking, like there's some part of my mind that was like having to process and think about that I think that guilt eats away at you of like, no, like that the fact is that even crossed my mind at all now and then, like it makes you, it eats away at you, like it's just a sad, you know, circumstances. And for Grover, he said when we first got that, like, you know, the, you know, awareness of her condition, like for him, he was like pleading with the universe for them just to have more time. Hell, give me the cancer just so that she doesn't have it. And it's just like the guilt of still being here, living like, you know, it's like, it's essentially, it's, and I think this takes on many different forms. It's survivor's remorse of like, this is like, you know, it can take on many different forms, but in this particular case, it is like she died and I'm still here, like I'm living and she doesn't have, like that's the guilt of like, why am I still alive? Why am I still here and that person isn't? So I think that was kind of a powerful moment for Grover, and even him opening up to AJ, being like, you know, she's like, oh my god, look at you, you're opening up, even admitting to Tyler like, hey, I wasn't here because I had a therapy. And she's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, there is nothing to be ashamed of, right? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, you know, I like to, you next time you go see your dad, I like to come too. And she's like, yeah, I like that, you know. So I thought that was pretty dope. So there's that. And then finally there's also the whole thing with Tyler, speaking of him and Maya. Maya found all his artwork and stuff like that, and he was just, his photography, and he was like, no, don't do any of that. Don't, like, put that back. I don't want anyone to see it. And behind his back, she kind of published it. Sent it to, like, some, like, an art people in town and stuff, but they turned it down. And what pissed him off was, like, she did it behind his back, but also it's because he didn't like his artwork being judged, because it's, like, they're kind of, like, snobby, very old people, like, right. At the end of the day, you know, you can't hide away your art. Like, put your art out there. Don't worry about what anyone else has to say, whether it's them or anyone else. Like, just it matters what your art means to you. And ultimately, he ends up showcasing a show at, you know, with everyone whose art was also rejected. So, And he opens up to Maya, like, it's easy to kind of be the guy behind the guy, but when you're kind of putting yourself out there, it's a little harder, which I think Maya can understand too, because I mean, at the end of the day, Maya, like, I'm sorry I did what I did, but it's also because, like, she was like, you're my friend, you've always helped me out, and also I've seen that you've been a little down because of, you know, Bella and everything, like, that whole thing, so, like, she wanted to kind of pick his spirits up, by, you know, it's like, but you're really good, you're really talented, and I just wanted you to see that and kind of be able to relish in that. But for him, it's a thing where he constantly feels like people look at him and kind of judge him, and so he wanted to hide away a part of himself that wouldn't be judged. And, you know, but now it's a thing of, at the end of the day, I'm going to put myself out there little by little. I think this is a big step for his story as well in that regard. So I just thought all around, I mean, truth be told, this is a great episode with just a lot of the development. More and more we're learning, and just the steps for it that Greylock's taken. I'm curious to see the continuation of, like, this immigration. Like, are there going to be more people showing up at the borders? This whole thing with their dad. I'm curious what's going to happen. Like, I'd assume at some point Sarah's mom's also going to come home at some point too, and it's like, that's going to be an interesting and complicated family situation all around. So many complications, especially that Danny and Corinne thing. It's like, oh, you kind of knew it was coming, but you were kind of hoping it wouldn't, but we'll see how that all plays out. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, enjoy it, good day, and goodbye.